So, Jacques, I want to first thank you for joining us. I'm excited for today's conversation. As I mentioned, I think the topic itself falls under the umbrella of a critical theme that we're seeing in today's world, right? Especially prevalent in America, finding ways to position Black and brown people in positions of authority, positions of influence that help to really affect change at scale,
right.
Whether it's socially within our community, whether it's professionally within the corporate landscape. And so there's so many different dynamics to that conversation. Jacques is here today to provide us with a unique lens and insight into not only how to get involved with boards, but also how to navigate that court once you're in it. So I'm just going to give a brief detail into Jacques' bio, just so that I'm doing it justice, right? Jacques Pierre, he serves currently as the General Counsel and member of the Executive Committee for U.S. Retirement and Benefits Partners. Responsibilities include counseling the company's officers and partners on acquisitions, contracts, employment issues, litigation, and other general legal and corporate matters. Multifaceted, dynamic career, span government, corporate, and not-for-profit, education. Most recently, Jacques has served as the Assistant United States Attorney in the District of New Jersey, focused on prosecuting white-collar, public corruption crimes, amongst other higher profile cases. And during his time as a federal prosecutor, he worked as the U.S. Attorney's Special Prosecutions Division, as well as the Healthcare and Government Frauds Unit. Prior to this, Jacques worked for several years in New Jersey, New York offices at Lowenstein Sandler, LLP, focusing on complex business litigation, employment and labor law, and tech-related matters. Jacques also served as a law clerk for the Chief Justice of the New Jersey Supreme Court, and where he assisted, the court on a variety of legal matters. Prior to his legal career, so I told you, very, very storied career here, Jacques served as director at two small educational not-for-profit organizations in New York, also worked as a high school history teacher. He remains committed to educating youth by currently serving on the board of directors of Teak Fellowship and the board of trustees for the Mesa Charter High School. Jacques earned his Bachelor of Arts from Wesleyan, his JD from Rutgers. So shout out to Rutgers, whoever's from Rutgers in the building. And he is admitted to practice both in the state of New Jersey and the state of New York. So I just gave a list of accolades, of accomplishments on your end. Jacques, please, for the people that are in the room and participating in the discussion, walk them through that and just help to crystallize that story for them.
Sure, that's like the 3-minute synopsis, but it took me a lifetime to get here. I think I'll start you from the beginning. I was born and raised a few blocks from where I am right now, which is in Brooklyn, New York. I'm actually in Bed-Stuy, but I grew up in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn. Any Brooklyn cats out there? If you could guess, being a person of my color with the name Jacques Pierre, I'm of Haitian descent. I'm the children of two immigrant parents from Haiti. They came here in the 60s and worked very hard to get me through school. And as Tyrell said, I wound up getting a scholarship to a boarding school out in Pennsylvania for high school called the Westtown School, through a program called the Oliver Program, which is a program that's set up for Black and Latino youth to gain access to that type of education. And then once I graduated from Westtown, I went to Wesleyan for 4 years. And that's really where I hit the ground running with respect to what really intrigued me and what interested me, which was education at the time. I went into Wesleyan thinking I was going to be a doctor. I went in pre-med and walked out being an educator. While at Wesleyan, I didn't take classes in education and do anything like that. I just, I actually worked for 10 years for a wilderness school as an outdoor instructor, taking people out on the Appalachian Trail, hiking, low impact camping, rock climbing, and all that sort of stuff. That was sort of my thing. And in those sort of experiences, I took out a lot of inner city kids on the trail, learned and taught them, to gain self-confidence and how to sort of maneuver their way through the wood. All right, Wesley. And so, through that experience, once I graduated from Wesleyan, I decided I was going to go into teaching. So I became a history teacher. And the reason I walk you through, as Tyrell said, the sort of storied careers, it benefits me later. I was a high school teacher for about 5 years, teaching, European studies, American studies to high school kids. And then during that time, I decided to take a chance, and I became the director of a small not-for-profit out in Long Island called the On Your Mark Summerbridge program. And the Summerbridge program, I don't know if anybody out there knows about Summerbridge, but Summerbridge was a national collaborative of organizations that ran out of private schools. And we would hire high school and college students to become teachers, to teach, middle school students and get them college ready and ready for college prep programs. And that was the gist of the program. When I took over the program, I had the responsibility at that point to doing presentation to corporate boards so that they can give me money to run this program. I was tasked with raising a portion of my salary. I was tasked with raising the operating budget for the year. And I was tasked with hiring and firing, people throughout the years that I ran that program to make it a successful program. So I got introduced into corporate board environments pretty early from that first job with the On Your Mark Summerbridge program. Through my experience with the On Your Mark Summerbridge program, I worked with a woman named Justine Stamen. She directed a program in the Bronx called the Riverdale program. And at some point she found some seed money and started this new program called the Teak Fellowship. I went to join her in that program, and we got the Teak Fellowship off the ground. And that was about 25 years ago. And once we got that program off the ground and made it sustainable, we started an endowment. That program took off, and now it's one of the top 3 programs I think of New York City. We have Prep for Prep, Oliver, Teak. I think if you ask me private school, they all rival as the cohorts who they go to for children like ourselves. And in any event, the reason I went into all those details is because all of those experiences sort of lent themselves to what I do now. After I did the Teak Fellowship for about 3 or 4 years, I decided to go to law school. Why I decided to go to law school, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know. I went on a field trip with some kids. We went to the DA's office. The assistant district attorney was talking about what he did, and I said I could do that. So I went to law school the next year. And I happened to go to Rutgers, which is, I think, one of the most phenomenal programs I went to as part of the minority student program. It's a more intimate program. Was allowed to go there a few weeks before law school started, learned the ropes, and wound up doing pretty well in law school. And that led me to the law firm. And that's not really why I wanted to go to law school. Where I wanted to go, I actually went to be a prosecutor, but I wound up at a pretty prestigious law firm. And did that job for many years, and worked in a lot of sort of corporate environments. But ultimately, that wasn't for me. I left and went to clerk for the Supreme Court when that position became open. And again, that was a sort of happenstance. I went to the school one day to meet with Dean and said, "Look, I don't want to do this firm thing anymore. What should I do next?" And she said, "Funny you should ask. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court just called and needs a clerk. You should apply." So I applied. And he gave me the job on the spot, which was great. And then it turns out that the Chief Justice, his name is Stu Rabner, just came from the U.S. Attorney's Office. He spent 11 years in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And he's looking at me and he says, "Man, you should go to the U.S. Attorney's Office. You'd be a great litigator." And so I applied, got into the U.S. Attorney's Office, and has spent the past 10 years of my career there, prosecuting all kinds of cases. And that's an experience I wouldn't trade for anything. And recently, just this summer, I was put in touch with a headhunter who was looking for a general counsel for the current company I'm working with now. I did a few interviews over Zoom, just like this. Went in for one face-to-face, and then they hired me as their general counsel. I can tell you all the sort of things general counsels do, but it's not really relevant to this conversation. Now, throughout that whole path, and the reason I tell you about the path, because I sort of meandered my way to where I am now. I always stay committed to education. Always go back to law school and teach classes as I can. I sit on panels as I can. I was always participating in various boards. The 2 boards that I participate in now are, one, the Teak Fellowship. So the same Teak Fellowship that I helped to start back in 1999. Now I'm currently on the board of directors of that program. The founding director left. Many of the original board members have now gone, And so one of the roles I play there is sort of continuity and connection to the sort of historic path to that organization. So it's great to be part of that organization at this point. And secondly, I'm part of the board of directors for a small charter school, very small charter school called the Mesa Charter School. Mesa stands for Math, English, Science, and Arts. And I think that's what it stands for. In any event, I'm on that board mostly because during my years of working at Teak, I became friends with a young man that I had hired named Art Samuels, who then went on to start this program called the Mesa Charter School and asked me to be on his board at some point. And so that's how I found my way on boards. That's how I found my way being the head of general counsel at this company. And so as you can see, I sort of meandered my way through that. So the purpose of this talk today is to talk about how I sort of wound up on these boards and what to do to leverage yourself to get on boards, because that's sort of a different world than just sort of going to your 9-to-5 job. And so I would love to, I see some questions popping up on the side here, so I'd love to entertain a lot of those questions. I'm going to hit the first one from, I'm going to hit the second one. The first one came from Wesley a bit ago, but I see Matt's question about what does a board member do on a daily basis? And I'm going to start with that one if we can, Tyrell.
That sounds great. That sounds great. And everyone, please feel free to pepper as many questions as we can, as much as we can fit in between now and 7:45 or before they kick us out of here. We're going to get them all answered, right? You got my back on that one, right?
I got you.
All right, let's do it then. So let's jump into that first question.
Yeah, so the first question, I just want to take a step back about, so the first question is, what does a board member do on a daily basis? I'm going to step back from that and just sort of define what is a board? What does a board of directors do? And you know, obviously there are different types of boards. You have your not-for-profit boards, you got your corporate boards, but in essence, every board does the same thing. A board is a governing body. It's a body of people who come together and are responsible for the well-being of the organization that they are on the board of. And you know, the long and short of it is the board of directors are the people who are in charge. So they, you know, you might have an executive director of an organization, but that executive director answers to the board of directors. Or you might have a CEO of a company. That CEO answers to the president of the board of directors for that corporation. So a board, being on a board is actually a pretty important responsibility. You know, you have to pay attention to everything that's coming your way in terms of contracts, you know, liabilities, you know, anything that's going to sort of bind the organization to some deal. How much money you're spending. You have to pay a lot of attention to budgetary line items and spending. And you pay a lot of attention to, particularly when you're on a corporate board, you know, the finances become extremely important. Finances, because corporate boards are answerable to shareholders. All right, so they represent the shareholders of let's say publicly traded companies. And in the case of the company that I work for, it's a privately held company. Our board consists mostly of members of the private equity firm that owns our company. And so their whole thing is making money. They want a bottom line. And so what they pay particular attention to is, you know, our P&L, right? They want to know about profits, losses. They want to know what we're doing to make, you know, money, how we're sort of gaining revenue, how are we sort of leveraging ourselves? What are we doing with debt? Those are all important things. I mentioned that because, you know, as you start thinking about boards, whether you're thinking about not-for-profit boards or corporate boards, one of the key things that you guys should think about getting educated on is finance. You know, finance and finance speak, finance lingo. You know, profits and loss charts. You know, one of the things that I've had to ramp up on quickly, having come from 10 years of the government to now the corporate world, is you know, working in P&L charts and, you know, understanding what EBITDA is. You know, and if you don't get what EBITDA is, then you know. I'm sorry?
I say you just gave me flashbacks to college internships and going through boot camp, financial analyst boot camp. And
I've never been part of financial analyst boot camp, but I'm in it now. I got to tell you, as the GC of a privately held corporation, EBITDA is something I talk about every single day. And if you don't know what that is, you should look it up and take some classes and learn that, because it'll certainly be talked about if you are interested in being on any board, I think. So to answer your question, the first question, what do I do on a daily basis? That depends on the particular board. So, with respect to the TEAC Fellowship, right now my role with the TEAC Fellowship is twofold. One, I'm on the donations committee. So typically when you're on a board, you branch out and you join committees that have sort of discrete tasks, and you work on those discrete tasks off the time of the board meeting. So you don't work during board meetings. Board meetings are just reporting. During the time between meetings is when you're actually doing the work. And so I sit on the donations committee. I got to tell you, we don't do much work on that. There's someone who works at TEAC who is phenomenal at that. And, I'll tell you more about boards and donations in a second. But one of the things that I really do concentrate on with respect to the TEAC board now is our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. We have a task force that we're trying to institutionalize a committee to address diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for both our students and our board members. So I'm trying to. I actually am devoting a lot of time to that, and we're coming up with a mission and bylaws and a charter, so that we can get board approval to make this a standing committee. So just as important as the governance committee, just as important as the donations committee or investment committee, we want to make sure that committee is a standalone committee, that the board gets reports from every quarter, and that we're engaging in things that one, educates and prepares the board, and commits us to those principles of equity and inclusion and belonging, but also it affects our program. And obviously some of the more detailed programmatic things we're leaving to a committee that we're going to be working with, which is run by the staff, and the people who run the program. Like, we're going to leave that stuff to them. But in terms of sort of board activity, our committee will be responsible for that. So what do I do on the day-to-day? I'm on the phone a lot. Just today, I was on the phone with the chair of our board and the other co-chair of this committee. We're trying to set up meetings so that we can move this thing forward for our next board meeting. The other board that I'm part of, called the Mesa Charter School, that board's a very different board than the TEAC board. That board, again, is for a small charter school, and started by a good friend of mine. And I was not on his originating board. He didn't ask me to be, but I was a donor for that organization for a long time. So I don't. And when I say I was a donor, I'm talking, $50 here, $20 there. Like, you don't have to be rich to be a donor for an organization. But certainly my donating money showed my commitment to that organization, and I thought it was a great school. Now, at some point, a board opening happened, and my friend Art put an email out and said, "Listen, I need a new board member, preferably somebody with some legal skills." And so when I read that, I said, "Let me help Art out." And I wrote an email to him, and I went and talked to him and talked to his co-chair, met some students, went and visited the program, met some other board members, and then I was allowed to join that board. So my day-to-day with respect to that board, I do a lot of communicating with Art and Padua, the two co-directors of that board, with respect to some legal issues that they always have. So, and they're small issues. They're not huge issues. One, and two, I'm not their lawyer. They have hired counsel. They work with Paul White, which is an amazing firm who handles all their legal issues. But certainly when Art wants to bounce an idea off of me, or Padua wants to sort of engage in some event and wants to know, are we covered by this? Does our insurance policy cover this? They'll usually give me a call and ask me, hey, do you think this is a good idea? Or if a student's getting expelled and they need someone to sit in on their governance committee, I usually take up that role. So that's usually my day-to-day. The long and short of it is, if you're going to join any board, it's time consuming. You got to be able to put the time in for any board you join. I know for the corporate board that's part of our organization, they meet quarterly. And then there's a committee that also meets monthly to go over our P&L statements. All right. So monthly, we're reporting to the board committee about how we're doing as a business. And then quarterly, we're meeting with the entire board about how we're doing as a business, what we can improve, how we're going to sort of increase capital, and what are we going to change to decrease debt. Those are the things that happen on the corporate board. But obviously, the skills that are used on those two boards are very different. Obviously, the not-for-profit board, all volunteer. That's got to be a labor of love. You've got to be committed to that organization. You've got to love that organization for some reason. You got to be invested, because you're gonna have to put the time in, and no one's gonna pay you for it. Okay, but when you join a corporate board, which is contrary to that, corporate board members are typically compensated 6 to 7 digits. They get compensated for a lot of money. I know that a lot of corporate boards were made up of retired CEOs, CFOs, COOs. All of the C-suite people, when they leave their companies, or even when they're with their companies, can join corporate boards later on. A lot of private investors for private equity firms are members of boards. So that's not to say that being a corporate board member is out of your reach, but certainly those positions are things you've got to build up to. And you've got to sort of build up your brand, build up your career. You've got to establish a base that tells people, okay, this person should be on our board. This person knows how to direct companies, and this person has something to offer towards this corporation. So that's sort of a different animal than the not-for-profit boards. But I got to say, a lot of people who join, who strive to be on a corporate board, like I said, it's a highly compensated position. It's a position with a lot of responsibility. Start out being on not-for-profit boards. All right, a lot of them, that's how they build their resume. And I'm not suggesting that you join a not-for-profit board to build your resume. Like I said, it's got to be a labor of love. You've got to really enjoy the organization and be committed to what they're doing, because you're going to be asked to do things for them during your spare time. It's not going to happen during your 9 to 5 generally. And so, but that is how a lot of corporate board members begin, and start to prove that they have what it takes to sit on a committee to govern an organization.
Hey, Jacques, I want to catch you on that note, right? As we're talking about the distinctions between non-profit, between corporate, before we dive too deep, I do want to take a step back, right? Because I'm thinking about your experience. I'm thinking about our overall remit at Jopwell, which is to provide tactical insight in terms of next steps for these individuals who want to get involved and who want to have an opportunity to hopefully join a non-for-profit or corporate board in the future. So I would love for you to reflect on that introspective moment that you might have had with yourself, taking into consideration the experiences that you had, and then once that opportunity was presented to you to join that board, what made you know within yourself that you were prepared for that type of role, that type of serving in that type of capacity? And what was your ultimate goal at that particular juncture as you thought about joining the board? That's
a great question. And there are several pieces to that, but that's a great question. I'm going to try to answer them all. I'll point to one thing first, which is, you see all the gray hairs I got? That kind of told me I was okay to put myself out there and join the board. And I'm not suggesting anybody needs gray hairs to do that, but certainly you reach a point in your career where you feel confident enough that you can leverage your skills to join an organization and render opinions and render your perspective on how things should go and how things should work, and how you think things can be fixed. And so when you reach that level in your career, then you should start pursuing things like that. Don't get too comfortable where you are. Seek to push yourself and be part of organizations that are going to challenge you and use your skills in different ways. And so, a lot of what I said before, Tyrell, was about the sort of money making aspect of corporate boards and how people have used the sort of not-for-profit boards to build their resumes to get to these profitable corporate boards. But forget all that. what got me to the boards that I'm on now is my love of the organizations that I'm on. I have a vested interest in educating, kids of color in the urban environment. That's who I was. That's where I came from, and I want to make sure I'm giving back to kids who are kind of like me. And so I want to be part of programs that are doing that. And at this point in my career, I've done everything from cutting out stars for celebrations on stages, to teaching classes during the summertime, to taking kids out hiking. At this point in my career, I'm not doing that anymore. At this point in my career, I'm an attorney. I work for a pretty profitable company. And the way that I can give back is at a higher level. And so, like I said, when you feel ready and when you feel that you're at a point of your career that you want to be working at that higher level with the leadership of an organization, that's exactly what you should be doing. So you've got to have a love for the organization. Two, I think that you've got to put yourself out there. And if there's one lesson I learned, during my entire career, is that no one's going to give you anything, and no one's going to hand you anything just because they feel you deserve it. That's just not really how the world works. And frankly, having been part of organizations like TEAC, like Oliver, like PrEP, where I'm surrounded by other gifted and talented kids of color who do well in school. We get A's, we do what we're supposed to do. We achieve in great jobs. A lot of us go on to finance or law or doctors. That's all great, right? And no one's going to turn around and say, well, hey, you're a doctor, you should join this board. That's not how it works. You want to join a board, you've got to make it known to people that you want to be on a board.
Boom.
And so you got to put yourself out there. Like, you don't get anything just because you deserve it in this world. You just got to let people know that you want to do this. So how do you do that? You got to talk to clearly, to make it this far, you're going to have people that are your mentors. You have people that people that you look up to in certain career tracks. You got to look, you talk to people who are influential in that way. People that you've come across in your career, like leverage your network and let people know, this is what I'm interested in doing next. I want to join a board. I want to join a board of a not-for-profit. I've been looking at this particular not-for-profit, and if you know them, then start talking to that not-for-profit. And if you haven't had a prior relationship with them, then get involved, right? A lot of our board members on the TEAC Fellowship start out as mentors. We have a mentoring program where we match up, students with older adults as their mentors, and mentor-mentee relationships used to last for years and years and years because they have that rapport and they have that relationship. But it's not just about the mentor and the mentee. It connects the mentor to our program as well. And people see how the program is working. People see what the needs of the program are, and they begin to volunteer more. And then, eventually they might make it known that they want to be part of the board, and lo and behold, they're part of the board some years later. So things like that happen very organically. And like I said, if you have a love of the program and the work that they're doing, and you get invested and involved, things like that will happen very organically for you. And it doesn't have to be sort of a manipulative thing. Now, to the extent that you are at a point in your career and you want to seek getting on a not-for-profit board, there is one program that I know out there. It's called Board Match. And if you go to their website, boardmatch.net, they're a program based out in California and San Francisco, and they hold events around the country. Board Match. Board Math. I'm sorry. But they hold events around the country where they will gather, 150 not-for-profits in a gymnasium, and they'll all have booths, and they invite, people who are well into their careers or people who just have particular skills that they want to leverage to come speak to these not-for-profits. And these not-for-profits, they're not looking for donors, they're not looking for mentees, they're looking for board members. So the board map is for programs that are looking for board members. They want to attract people to come and help their organizations, one, raise money, two, become sustainable, three, with their programming, whatever their needs are. That's why they're there. And I know on the Mesa Charter School board that I sit on, at least 3 of our members have come from the board match events. And I've been asked to go to the board match events with our directors and sit and interview people to be our next board member. So, if you're interested in that sort of thing, there are programs out there such as Board Match, to board match, MATCH, Wesley.
I think we got it. I think we got it now. So I have a quick question on that, Jacques, and I want to be mindful of time. I'm going to ask this one question, and then I'm going to get the 4 questions that we have left from the audience. And then hopefully we're in good time. I'm not getting scolded by Tani, but this is a great conversation. I want to get all these questions answered. But I do want to speak tactically around presenting yourself, right? So you talked about getting the opportunity, knowing what you wanted to be involved in, but at the end of the day, closed mouths don't get fed. You ask now for your plate, you're there at the table, but ultimately you still have to show value. Can you talk to me about how you went about demonstrating your value, and what is the formal process like? Is there an interview to be a part of the board, or did you shake a hand and you were in the door? Talk to us a little bit more about the formal process and how you demonstrated your acumen to be a part of it.
That's great. So, I got to speak to 2 different processes because I'm on 2 different boards, and you're going to find that in any particular board that you want to join has their own sort of unique process and their own unique needs and their unique sort of dynamic. So, the TEAC Fellowships board, I got to say, is very formal, very corporate. Most of the members on that board are from the corporate world. They're from private equity firms, and they're very formal. And so for that particular board, I went through a series of 3 interviews over the course of 3 years. Finally, once I met the current head of that board, Mark Becker, he was like, I know you've been interviewed for 3 years. I think it's time to let you on this board. Now, you're probably asking, why would I interview for 3 years to get on this board? And again, this is the TEAC Fellowship. This is the program that I helped to start back in the 90s. So I really wanted to get on this board and be of assistance to this program. So, in between that time, during that 3 years, I'm living my life. I'm working my 9-to-5 job. I'm prosecuting cases. So it wasn't any skin off my back that it didn't happen in a sort of fast sort of way. And I think you should all keep that in mind, that these relationships are long-term relationships. They're not sort of short-term things. If you want to get on the board of an organization, you're talking, usually a 3-year commitment, if not more. And depending on the board that you're joining, their bylaws may not even call for you getting off the board ever. So you getting off that board might happen 10 years later when people are like, you think you spent enough time here? Maybe it's time for you to go. So depending on how strict and how formal their bylaws are, you could be on that board forever. So these are long-term relationships. They're not short. So take your time to, they're going to walk interview. And treat the interview just like a job interview. Put on a suit, go and talk about what skills you might bring to the table. And I don't think most boards are looking for particular skills, particularly on the not-for-profit side. They're not looking for particular skills. They don't, it was sort of uncanny that Art sent an email out and said, I need someone with lawyering background to be on this board, because they actually didn't need a lawyer. They have a lawyer that they retained who answers their questions. So they don't need a lawyer, but what Art wanted was someone he could trust, a confidant, which is what lawyers do. This is what I am for the CEO I work for. Someone he could bounce ideas off of. And so that's what he wanted for me. But that's not the role of the other board members. I have a lot of board members. There's a board member on the Mesa Charter Board who is a research scientist. There's another member who is the head of another charter school. There's a head of a private school. There's a head of a bank. And they also have particular perspectives and input during our meetings, but all of us sort of work together to make sure that the school is operating. And so, you're going to have to go through some interviews. You got to show some interest. So if you're trying to be on the board, you've expressed interest and they've expressed some interest in you, they're going to ask you to come visit. You got to go visit. All right. Because they're looking to see if you're interested in the organization. They may ask you to interview. They may ask you for a resume. They may ask you to take a lot of steps. The Mesa Charter School Board that I'm on is part of the Department of Education for New York City. So the DOE has their own criteria for who gets on boards of schools. I had to get fingerprinted. I had to get a background check. And, I had to do all sorts of weird things just to get on this board. So you got to ask yourself, is it worth it? Do I want to go through this? Do I really want to go through all these steps to be of assistance to this organization? So like I said, you really got to be interested in the work that they're doing. And I want to say one more thing about that is the skill that you bring to the table. They don't necessarily have to be corporate or lawyer skills. Like if you are, let's say, an up and coming artist or like a performance artist or anything, and you want to be on a board because you want to be of assistance, there's a not-for-profit out there for you, right? There's a not-for-profit out there that focuses on performance art for students, or performance art for, I don't know, performance art for the homeless. I don't know, but there's a not-for-profit out there doing it, and you can find it and get involved. And if that's the type of board that you want to be on, then you can get on that board, and they're not-for-profits are very niche sort of organizations, and there's not-for-profit for every sort of level of interest that you might have. So get involved in the things that you actually love, and you'll find that these things will happen organically. Now, with the corporate board, different story, right? But again, if you're following your passions and getting involved in not-for-profit boards, while during the 9 to 5 hours, you're actually working your job, succeeding, doing well at that, those things should converge at the end to your being able to get on these corporate boards. Again, pay attention to the gray hairs. I don't think I have gray hairs on my hair, but I see them in this camera. It took me a while to get here, but so again, it's a long game.
I think you're making the salt and pepper. It looks good on you, man. So own it.
I got it.
So we want to make sure that we get through these questions, right? And so we got about 5 questions from the audience. Let's just rattle through them, right? You and me, Jacques. Yeah. So I'm going to start with the first that, I think we've kind of touched on it a bit. So maybe we can knock this out the park. How do you tailor your networking strategy when you decide you're ready to find that corporate board role? So we talked about different forums that they can attend. Talk to us a little bit about just broad level. I guess, what are your thoughts around pivoting the existing networking strategy to, hey, I'm now looking for a board position. Now this is my strategy. Go forward.
Look, that's actually an easy one, right? And I said it before, just leverage the relationships you have, the organic relationships you have. Don't go out and make relationships that are not sort of real, right? People who are starting organizations, people who are involved in organizations, people who are very passionate about the things that they do. If you're interested in doing that sort of thing too, reach out to them. You have mentors, or you should be having mentors. You should be forging those relationships with people who are doing really well at their craft. Forge those relationships and let them know that you take that path. And again, as you said, Tyrell, you just got to let people know what you want to do, and they will assist. Particularly in forums like this, I think I've found that in my career, people of color, I let them know what I want to do. We all kind of help each other out, or at least we should. And so, let people know that you're interested in taking this path, and look for people who've taken it, and they'll walk you through.
Gotcha. All right, next question. We're gonna go through this now. How do you suggest people, and this is right in tandem with that, how do you suggest people create that professional development strategy in going about advancing their career to senior leadership, board membership? So I think that's going back to you having such an eclectic background. Is it necessary to have that complementary skill set? Do you need to target into something specifically to hone in on that skill set, to bring that to the table? What are your thoughts around either or, that type of approach?
I think if you've meandered your way through a career like mine, and you've sort of you've touched a lot of things, then you can bring a lot to the table, right? That's actually how I got this job as a general counsel. I was able to parlay my way into this company by saying, look, I've touched education, not-for-profit, corporate, and government. So you guys, I've got the perspectives that you guys want. And they bought that, and they hired me. Ha ha. But in any event, I do think that if you have a path that you want to take, maybe you want to be a doctor, there are plenty of medical boards, hospital boards, all sorts of research boards that you can be part of as well that cater to your craft. So, you could obviously be fixated on a particular skill, or you can leverage all the skills that you have to get on boards, because, and again, it depends on the organizations you want to be part of and what you bring to the table.
I love it, man. I love it. I'm going to ask this. So first things first, we're not going to be able to get through every single one of the questions.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So what we'll do is I'll leave Jacques to close with his contact information, or whatever information you're able to share with us, Jacques. and the audience. But before we get this last question for you, and I think this just speaks to the overall remit of today's event, really being a hub for guidance, tactical advice, mentorship at scale for the community, I want to talk to you about that feeling of affecting change, going back to when we first started this discussion. What does that ability to affect change feel like for you? I'd love for you to be able to just describe your greatest accomplishment, being a part of a board, and an example of where you had that influence. How did it make you feel? What was it, first of all? And then how did it make you feel?
My greatest accomplishment as part of a board.
Yes, correct.
Oh man, I don't even know what that is. I think, I think it'd have to be with the Mesa Charter School during this whole COVID-19 pandemic situation. I think our greatest accomplishment as a board was leveraging our relationships and our networks to raise enough money to support a lot of our students who had, look, the school that I'm on a board of is in Bushwick, Brooklyn. It's an impoverished neighborhood. Most of our students are poor Latino kids who come from, immigrant families. During this COVID-19 crisis, a few of our students lost both parents. A few of them lost one parent, and they found themselves in dire straits. And as a board, an organization, we came together and we raised a lot of money to make sure that we could take care of these kids. I think that's my proudest achievement as a board member. Really leveraging our relationships. And like I said, we reach a certain point in our career where we can give a certain amount. And I think that's the kind of thing you always owe people when you got to give back to during those times.
I love it, man. And I'm over here just kind of soaking this all in. But, I told you before when we met, this is something that was never on my radar. And as soon as I spoke to you, I immediately grabbed my friend and said, we need to start thinking about this ultimately for the future for us. So thank you again. I'd love to just leave you the last words. The people are here. I'm sure that they've all enjoyed this conversation. I'd love to just let you close it off, Jacques, with final words for all of those that have been joining this conversation. Appreciate
Certainly.
you.
Look, I believe in uplifting each other. I put my email address on there, and I mean it. If you got questions, if you need guidance, just email me, jacques.pierre@gmail.com. And now I don't throw that out there lightly. I've been part of a law school, the minority student program at Rutgers School of Law. We take care of each other. Any law student emails me, I'm going to help them out. So I'm loving the fact that I'm part of this network now. If you have questions on how I got on boards, or if you think I can be of any assistance to you, email me. And I mean that. I'll respond.
Red love is the Brooklyn
That's
way.
right.
What better way to close than on that? We'll end it there, Jacques. Again, pleasure.
Yeah, good to meet you all. I'm glad you all came.
Thank you all. We're going to head back out. So for everyone that's in attendance, we're going to head back out for closing remarks. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Jacques, again. His contact information is there. Feel free to send those questions along. I surely will be hitting him up for my own questions. So, Jacques, again, pleasure, man. Let's all back over into the main stage for closing remarks. Thank you all.
Take care.